What's going on, everybody? My name is Sarin, co-host of the TechKnowledgical podcast, and welcome back. In the third episode of this podcast, we bring on John Pepelnjak, a current MBA candidate at the Wharton School with Avi, our other co-host. And we wanted to talk to John today all about startups. So he went to Notre Dame in undergrad, graduated with a political science and computer applications degree, and then went to work at a bunch of different startups like Flexport, Zuora, and more. And so in this episode, you'll get to hear about his experience at these different startups, specifically within different functions like sales or operations. So you get to hear about those different kinds of functions. You also get to hear about things like compensation at startups, how sales and other functions work together as a startup grows, and what it's really like working at startups and being in the thick of it with only a few people. And really the big takeaways here are following your passion and going into a space where, number one, you feel like that company will really grow and you're following a leader who will do something big, but you're also passionate about that specific problem that the startup is looking to solve. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into this podcast. Hope you all like this episode, and please leave us any feedback. We're open to hearing anything. Thank you.
So hello, everyone. We got an exciting guest on the podcast today, John Pepelnjak. John's currently a first-year MBA student with me here at Wharton, and he's going to talk about his background in startups and just the different roles he's played. So good to have you on, John. If you just want to give like a quick background about yourself, and we'll just dive into it.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me here. Excited to join Avi and everyone else. So my name is John Pepelnjak. Most people just call me Pep for short. Again, first year MBA candidate here at Wharton. Focusing more on entrepreneurship, innovation, and finance. And, previously coming from a background of a bunch of different startups in varying stages, from consumer to enterprise, and from, the apartment stage through to, nearing an IPO. So, in varying roles as well. So I've kind of run the gamut as far as startup type and opportunities. So happy to talk about it today.
Awesome. So I think we kind of just want to start off with, like coming out of Notre Dame, what really drove you to startups first, going into like the consulting or banking route? So I'd love to learn more about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it certainly was a consideration. I think I think at Notre Dame, you're certainly kind of nudged in that direction of consulting and banking and professional services. And, obviously a very strong route for many to take. And one I considered myself, kind of dabbled with more of the consulting side. My junior year, did not handle the recruiting process totally appropriately. I was certainly underprepared. I was immature, and it's all good. But in the back of my mind, I always had this kind of entrepreneurial bug to kind of get out of my system. So after graduation, I kind of just leaned into that and decided to move to Silicon Valley, kind of figure out what was entrepreneurship all about. What was this culture of innovation all about? I kind of want to see it firsthand. So I had like a few $100 left to my name after graduation. And I lived in this hacker house, this Airbnb hacker house in 2014, kind of just looking for a job, and had some things in process already, but there were certainly some hiring biases towards being in Silicon Valley. And then something landed. So my first job was at a place called Zuora, now a public company out of school. And in 2014, they were certainly mature, but probably, I want to say in the range of like maybe $400 million valuation, but not entirely sure. But first job in sales, and pretty entry level stuff and lead generation. That was kind of my start, but that's how I got there.
Cool. Yeah, we'd love to just dive more into that experience of like what it was like working at Zuora as a fresh college grad, doing sales right out of school. Would love to know what it was actually like, what like the entry level sales role is like, but also just want to know overall, like how was the startup experience, and how'd you like it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what kind of drove me to sales initially, well, some, out of circumstance and kind of, I didn't have a ton of options as far as what I could do in tech initially, right? I majored in political science and I did what was effectively, a soft computer science supplementary major. Um, so I'm kind of this tweener for a lot of job requirements, and I didn't come from a consulting background and all this stuff. So, I kind of leaned on some mentors and reached out to people who I really admired and um, tried to figure out my place in tech. And you'll find a ton of more liberal arts focused people coming in from a entering into a sales background, or sorry, entering into a sales position. Um, and so, these tech startups, they have a ton of, they recruit, heavily out of the UC schools. And I'd say like half of my friends were like history majors or something. So, yeah, it ended up being a really good fit. I mean, sales, described to me it's all about kind of communicating with other people to earn their trust and to leverage your knowledge and um, credibility to get them to transact something. And um, I also was certainly driven by the compensation structure for sales. Like if you work really hard, you can make a lot of money, and that was something that was important to me. So yeah, that's kind of how I started Zuora. And so for folks curious, a lot of people enter in these roles called sales development or business development positions, where you're focused on generating pipeline for an organization. And frankly, I'd argue that generating pipeline is maybe the biggest issue that some of these huge software companies have. I mean, it's a problem for every company, up and down market, but even the Zuoras of the world. So, yeah, enter that role, and a lot of it is, cold emailing, prospecting, cold emailing, cold calling, and just trying to figure out what, say a VP of marketing wants, or a VP of finance is looking for, to help them do their jobs better.
Awesome. And to kind of build on that, so I know a question I get pretty often from some of our listeners is, for someone like yourself who was maybe not a technical major, right? You studied political science. You sounds like you dabbled into some technical things.
Mm-hmm.
Jumping into Silicon Valley, coming to Zuora, people might be afraid of not having that technical knowledge, right? Or knowing how to operate within a tech company and have credibility and respect, right? How did you kind of build that, or how did you start to feel comfortable when you joined to really, garner that respect and grow?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I think, Zuora in particular was really well equipped to train their people. And it was, Zuora sells a pretty complex, fintech product, right? They're trying to, make subscription billing super easy for all kinds of businesses. So, yeah, one thing that these Silicon Valley companies get really well is the sales enablement is on point. So I wouldn't be too worried if you're new and know nothing about fintech, or nothing about, I know, cloud infrastructure, right? You can figure it out. You don't need to have any computer science background. But what's more important is that you kind of know how to communicate with people, and how to listen, and actually care about somebody. It's half the battle, frankly. But yeah, with sales, you get to learn. You see firsthand and on the ground what the value drivers are in a business. You see and hear what the customers are saying, and so you are on the front lines of what the market needs and wants. And I think for a junior person coming out of school, and you're sharp and you're motivated to do well, I mean, you can kind of do whatever you want, frankly, if you create your own path, and people will give you opportunities. Just prove you're an asset internally. So you don't have to do sales forever. You can do a lot of things, but a good start for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, no, that's really good to hear. It seems there's like a big emphasis on hustle, right? You come in, you have to hustle really hard. You do the cold calls, the cold emails, you prove yourself. So I'm really interested in, so you say you got your start in sales, but how did you kind of think about your career after Zuora? So I saw that you jumped to, I believe, Spreecast right after Zuora, and then Flexport, like really good big brand name startups brand name startups today. So I'd just love to hear like how you kind of thought about that path. And then even like a lot of people will be jumping jobs in the future. So how you thought about like which job to take, which company to take, and how you kind of made that decision.
Yeah. 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 So at a high level, I did have a lot of job hops, and it's certainly a hard conversation when applying to school. It's like, or any jobs, like, why do you have 6 jobs? That could be a really long answer, but the short answer is, at least for that transition to Spreecast, look, I came to Silicon Valley, like I said, to like figure out what entrepreneurship is all about, what drives the spirit of innovation. And, I think I had my first real taste of that in the job that followed Zuora. And I was only Zuora for like, 5 months or something. But there's this guy named Jeff Fleur, and Jeff Fleur he was the founder and CEO of StubHub. And a Wharton undergrad himself. And he was in the early stages of Spreecast, which is the social video broadcasting platform. So think like a Google Hangouts that's more interactive, right? If you guys are familiar with what Clubhouse is doing, or House Party, right? The idea of more spontaneous communication with other people around topics and that interests you. So frankly, there it was like, look, I don't know if there's a much better opportunity to learn from someone like that, who's been there and done that and build stuff. So it was a small startup at the time, like 20 people. And I just came in more as a generalist and kind of hacked away at random problems, but more focused again on kind of just experimenting with, these business models we were testing, from, a subscription, kind of, subscription model for like Zoom or something, to figuring out other kind of affiliate partnerships we could try in the podcasting space. Learned a lot there, and that was the reason for that jump. And then to others like to Flexport, Spreecast was, I think you kind of wake up. There's a wake up call. There was certainly a wake up call for me where some startups don't quite work out, right? And unfortunately, Spreecast wasn't quite going to work out. And the value I was adding, wasn't pushing the needle anymore. So the company kind of pivoted and focused more on the technology we were building, right? Shifting more from a desktop focused version to being on mobile, like a House Party. I love my time there, and certainly learned that, very powerfully, Silicon Valley is about experimentation, and venture capital funds a number of experiments, but there's only so many experiments you can run. And certainly, worthwhile experiments. We had product market fit maybe today, but maybe we were a bit early then, so a lot of lessons there. And Flexport, they took off, and kind of returned back to building kind of pipeline at Flexport. Worked with a mentor of mine to really initiate the kind of sales development funnel, in identifying prospects and, creating basically email sequences and, phone, cold calling strategies that could be used at scale. That's a lot there, but that gets that in the right direction.
There's actually a lot of goodness in what you said. And I think 2 big takeaways from your experience is the first one, like when you moved over to your first, or to the startup after Zuora, is just like following people is actually a pretty powerful thing. And if there's somebody that you admire, somebody that you think has done some really cool things, and they're almost like a great mentor to you, or somebody that you think is super successful, like following those kinds of people. I've heard tons of people do that in their career, and they've had a lot of success doing that. And the second thing that I noticed is pretty interesting is startups can fail. And I think, a lot of people coming out of college and undergrad, specifically, that their mindset is like, oh, I want to go the more conservative route, work at a bigger company, work at a consulting firm, because that's generally what people do. And people are a little scared of startups because startups are more risk or higher risk. So I just want to like dive a little deeper and understand what was going through your mind when that startup was going under, and like what was the culture like, what was everybody thinking, like what was happening at that time?
Yeah. So, I mean, with Spreecast, the culture was awesome. And Jeff is a leader I really admire. And I admire how he handled all that, because he had been there and done that. He had already founded a very successful multi-billion-dollar startup. Right. So you're right. I mean, I think there's few more, impactful things you can do than to kind of, watch how someone super impressive and competent and super ethical handle these problems. Right. And in the case of Spreecast, they did keep going on after me for a little bit. But again, the business model changed. We weren't trying to sell subscriptions anymore. And that's kind of where that was my job, trying to figure out how we can sell this thing. But you saw, like a leader in Jeff, and kind of handle tough situations where so much of this game of startup stuff is about, timing the market. Right. And there's a chance that we were like a little early, right? I don't know if you guys remember like Periscope on Twitter, but this was kind of like when that was taken off a little bit, but Periscope didn't quite take off. They were acquired by Twitter. But I think frankly, now in 2021, I think we're just starting this idea of like, video broadcasting, and interactive video broadcasting. So product market fit, that's maybe the most powerful lesson I learned, if anything, in Silicon Valley, how important that is. Because you maybe a few years later in the future, maybe this thing would have been huge. I don't know. But yeah, that's something I carry with me today. And yeah, it's not all sunshine and rainbows and startup stuff. It's absolutely not. And you're right. Like, there's for what I've done, effectively, there's no playbook, right? And it's been a good and bad thing, where things have not quite worked out. Things have kind of worked out. I've done jobs that I've, maybe not going to be great at. I've tried things that, I learned a lot about myself, and have shaped me who I am today. So, yeah, tough playbook to follow. I'm not saying I'd recommend it to everybody, but I would recommend to anybody trying tech, like, keep your options open. You don't need to do just consulting. You don't have to just do banking. You can, and that's awesome. Absolutely. But there are some untrodden paths out there for everybody to try. And you know what? You can always, what Jeff told me, and I'm like, I was worried about jumping jobs. He's like, it's okay. Like, you're a smart guy. I'll figure it out. And like, worst case scenario, you can always go back to school. So here I am. just get good grades in college, and then you figure the scores out, and it'll work out. And I'm very thankful to be here for sure. So hopefully that answers it.
That's so interesting. And touching on like Periscope, I remember when Periscope came out like a couple of years ago, it was like super hot out of South by Southwest, and everyone's like, this is the next big thing. And then you had like that hangout app, the party app. So it's just so interesting to see, like, you can have like a good idea, but it could just be way ahead of the time, and no one's ready to adopt it, because now you have like Clubhouse and all these different apps where people are just getting on and collaborating and blowing up. But I also really wanted to talk about, so like, let's say, a lot of our audience could be our undergrads or people that are in consulting, and they're thinking like, I want to go to the startup world. Are there specific signals that you're looking out for when you're evaluating startups and determining like, this is where I want to work? Like, are you looking at like who's invested in the startup? Like, who are the employees of the startup? Like, has the founder like had any exits in the past? Or like, what are some other areas that you look at?
100%. Yeah. Frankly, the companies I had chosen, I kind of thought of it as if I was playing VC a little bit, right? Where I'm finding impressive founders, I'm finding interesting markets. And personally, I want my mind to be curious about where this could be, the space could be, what this team is, able to accomplish. Certainly, yeah. I mean, I guess, Flexport's a unicorn now. MindTickle is near unicorn status. Ethos is near, they've raised over 100 million, half billion range. Bird Eye's getting up there too with, good things ahead. If there's a common thread amongst, in identifying a startup, if you want to play VC yourself, some VC, certainly something I'm trying to do. I think you look at leaders you admire and then everything's top down, right? Especially at a startup that early, it's like culture is absolutely set top down. Find an authentic leader who like actually gives a shit about his or her people. Number one, you can judge their competency per their previous experience, but I'm not as a 22, young kid, like I'm not in a great position to judge someone's professional competency who's in their 40s, 30, whatever. I don't know anything about the world at that point. I still don't know a whole lot about the world. But, I'd say, look, if you're going to join a company, find something that honestly makes you curious about the problems. And if you care about the problem, I know this is kind of trite, but like, if you care about the problem, your mind will go in different directions. So I was curious about all these problems that each of these companies were solving. And frankly, I really admired the leaders at all of them. And I think Jeff, for example, was in Tinzo, Zuora, really kind of set the bar as to like, what does a great leader look like who can take a company to new heights? Flexport, Ryan Peterson, CEO of Flexport, super passionate about what he's doing. I remember watching a YouTube video of Ryan, and so I joined like right after they raised their seed, right during their Series A raise. And I'm watching this video, Ryan, I'm like, damn, this guy is endlessly curious about this problem of democratizing trade in the world and, creating efficiencies around freight forwarding. I'm like, damn, this guy's legit and he gives a shit. And I'm like, all right, yeah, this works. And boom, yeah, they're a multi-billion-dollar unicorn. So, I mean, I'm taking guesses too, but I think a lot of it starts with judging the character of the leader, because, everything is top down. They set the tone.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool way to think about how you want to evaluate startups or go work at a startup, is thinking like you're a VC and really assessing that leadership team, that leader. And to build off of that, right? Like you want to assess that you're a VC because it's like you're almost investing in that company, right? And so and a big part of that is compensation. A big part of the compensation is equity and stock options. So I'd love for you to just dive a little bit deeper. You touched a bit on this earlier. Like, what is compensation at a startup like? How does that work? And like if you can explain a little bit about stock options and equity as well, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess real brief, one thing, if you join a Silicon Valley company, the expectation is you get some level of equity, right? So, I mean, going into it, if you're a junior person, you're not going to get a whole lot of equity. But I'd say it's wise to understand, kind of, loosely what your percent of the, shares outstanding would be, right? And, certainly was consideration at all these startups. Like when I joined, MindTickle, that was the first like 13 people in the United States. So I was curious about my take there. Previously, most of the team had been in India. I actually met the guys at MindTickle in that Airbnb hacker house when they had been raising with Excel for their seed. So the power of staying in touch and like meeting interesting and really awesome people. And no surprise, their leaders are awesome, great people, and they're doing very well. I don't know if that really answers the question, but having a rough idea of, look, if you're an head engineer or VP of engineering, like you're going to get a lot more equity. But there's a lot of good resources out there to evaluate the kind of market competitiveness of your equity.
Yeah. That makes sense. And definitely junior people don't get equity at all, or as much equity. But what about like how sales compensation works and commissions? Can you provide some color around that?
Sure. Yeah. So all depends on the organization, but it's a leveraged compensation structure where there's almost always a base that accounts for like maybe 50% of your total pay, 60, 70, maybe percent. So So yeah, base pay, and then typically there's an on target number. So you have to bring in, X number of leads or X, X total pipeline. You have to bring in $1 million of total pipeline that enters the funnel, or you're maybe compensated by total closed won deals. And typically, if you go over your number, right, that's what they consider accelerators. So most of these startups have uncapped commission structures. So if you're 110% of quota, you're going to get an accelerator on top of that. So you'll be making more basically per dollar that you generate for the business. That helps. Yeah. So yeah. And sometimes there's decelerators where if you're like below 50%, you'll make less than what your on target earnings would have been. But typically if you do your job and do it well and you're in a good market, then you should hopefully have a shot at getting above your accelerators.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for answering. I think that's always a question, is if I'm going to go to a startup, how much am I going to get paid, especially in sales where it might be more commission based or lead based, right?
Yeah.
So to kind of bring it back to the structure of the company and the functions, you've been a part of, sounds like more on the sales and the go to market side of things. So we've talked about product management, we've talked about product marketing, we talked to a data scientist. Maybe it would be very helpful for you to explain, and maybe throughout the life cycle of some of the companies you've been in as they've grown, how sales and marketing fit in to the organization, and maybe some of the structures and processes you've been through with, engineering and product and design, and leadership generally, how the organizations kind of flow and work together.
Sure. Yeah. Still trying to figure it out, but if, on the sales and marketing front, right, if you're thinking like, a year, 9 months, a year ahead of time, the marketing team, that's all they're thinking about, 9 to 12 months ahead. Where do we need to go? Where are we going to find our customers? What message is going to resonate with them? And you start building the relationships then, right? I'm going to simplifying this a great deal. Sales, right? Then sales more focused on the 3, let's say, up to 9 months. So maybe 1 month to 9 months in execution. You've nurtured these relationships. You have your message down, and you need to make sure they buy something. So yeah, at a high, this is SaaS, right? At the high level, you've got your lead generating funnel. You have your sales development organization, individual people, cold calling, cold emailing, generating lists, working hand in hand with marketing. Marketing are the one, spending money on AdWords, doing, account-based marketing campaigns, a lot of, getting out in the field, doing events, etc. So that's kind of how that works, super high level. You want to get into like product? What my understanding of all that is?
Maybe if you could explain, like, you're talking to customers all the time, right? As sales, how has your process been getting that feedback, maybe back to the engineering and the product team to help build the roadmap out?
Yeah. So certainly sales is reporting a lot of what they hear on the ground, as far as desired product requirements by individual customers or kind of different industries, right? Similarly, I'd served with MindTickle. I was actually in a post-sales implementation position. So I was managing our accounts on the West Coast. We had accounts like Nutanix and Cloudera, and we wanted to make sure we maintained those logos and had an opportunity to expand within those accounts. So I did a whole lot on the customer success and implementation side to gather requirements, because I'm working closely with, so these people bought the software, right? But then after you've got a CSM who's managing that relationship and gathering requirements, understanding where else the product can help the organization, and continuing their relationship. So, how every organization funnels these product requests, it's all over the place, but, oftentimes working with, product managers work closely with sales teams. They work closely with CS teams, and there's regular conversations about what you need to do to close a deal, right? Because at these startups, it's like you're all trying to get these logos, right? You're a mid-stage startup. It's all about the logo. So what do we have to do to get this deal across the line? How quickly can product and engineering act to make sure this is part of our contract? And this is all on the SaaS side, and happy to talk on the consumer side of things, which is different ballgame, but that's typically how the team kind of functions, in my opinion. Again, I don't know a lot, but that's what I've seen.
Yeah, no, I think, and you made an important call out there, and I think it's great you have experience both on the pre-sale side, where there's a lot of focus on getting customers and getting leads in to actually get them on board into using your products, at least in the enterprise space, and then actually, helping the customer get started when they want to use the product, and then expanding their usage and consumption on the post-sale side, right? Those are two different, very important functions, within an enterprise business. So, yeah, great to call out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Land and expand, right?
Exactly.
That's really the name of the game, because a lot of these companies, they'll start with you. They might sign up, X number of, I don't know, licenses or something, right? They might spend just the minimum amount to get through the door, but then it's oftentimes up to the CSM and the account executive in tandem to find other opportunities to expand revenue on that account. And oftentimes there are a lot of opportunities. So you develop new products in a year, right? You serve other customers within the organization better. So like MindTickle, it was a sales enablement software. We're initially enabling salespeople, right? Doing sales onboarding, sales training, like a learning management system. But a learning management system, if done well, can also train engineers. It can train, other CSMs or anybody in the organization. So that was, for example, what I'd been more focused on.
I know in the last question, you kind of touched on the difference between selling to businesses, like selling like enterprise SaaS and then selling to consumers. So that was like a place I really wanted to jump into. And then beyond that, I know you did a lot of like consumer facing sales and like product operations at Ethos. So I'd really love to learn more about, what was it like to be at such an early stage startup? Like you were employee number 7, working out of like an apartment. I think that's what was on your LinkedIn. So I just love to learn like how you scaled that company, the challenges you faced, and like the risk you took really joining like such an early stage company.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, jumping in the Ethos, that had been a super interesting transition. I'd been in touch with the founders there for some time. I was introduced to them probably a year before I started working there. They were friends with, they're good friends with one of my good friends from Chicago. And yeah, they started to build something and they needed some help, and I said I could help. And so yeah, I joined in as the 7th person. We were working out of an apartment. Pretty classic beginnings. And right at that point, they had raised like some pre-seed kind of money, pre-seed somewhere in there, and they were looking to raise an A in the next, say, 9-12 months. So that kind of became the goal, and I jumped in very much as a generalist. We called it product operations, but it was certainly a bit of everything. And we were selling life insurance, right? We were rebrand. To this day, it's an awesome product, making life insurance more affordable for people and easier to sign up for. So some things that I did there, right? Like I had to even get in order to talk to prospective clients, I had to get my life insurance license. So one of the crazy things I did is I literally sat for the life insurance test. At some random standardized testing center, and kind of crammed in a bunch of life insurance knowledge along the way. And so, I spent a lot of my time at Ethos, talking to clients, whether that's on the sales side, trying to get in, some new revenue or new kind of personas that we'd like to target, but also learning a lot about the product and what the market wanted out of the product. Did they value, say, ease of use and ease of sign up over anything else? And really just testing the water on a bunch of hypotheses, so that when the Series A came around, we'd be ready to scale with more proof and evidence behind the model we want to go to market with. But yeah, no, it was awesome. I worked with some really awesome people there, and Peter and Linky are co-founders there, and yeah, some young guns in Silicon Valley, and they're building an honorable product to really help people. But yeah, that was the experience I kind of signed up for when coming to Silicon Valley, right? Like, this was, how do I build stuff with really awesome people who really care about their mission? And I was super clear with the founders, and I just enjoyed being around them and learning from them, and just assisting wherever I could. Just bring value wherever you can. And so, like, I spend a lot of my time seriously, like, proceduralizing our call scripts, right? What are we going to say, and why are we going to say it? How many times should we, send an email to these people as a soft reminder to, hey, sign up for a life insurance, right? What did we want to do differently than everybody else was doing? What were we saying that was different? And for me, it was a little different. Like, I was a benefit of life insurance when I was growing up. My dad died when I was 13. And we would not have been able to stay in the same house, live in the same town, go to the same school, have the same life if we didn't have life insurance. So I kind of carried that passion, which is rooted in truth, on the phones and to my emails and to text messages to other people who had similarly wanted to protect their families. So yeah, that was a really awesome experience. I learned a lot.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. And, like, you have the passion for the problem. You have, like, the expertise to help build a company, and you really like the founders and who you're working with. So it really kind of all came together, right? To, like, really give you a good experience. But I think we are running up on time. So I just wanted to pivot to, like, our last kind of segment, which is really focused on, like, why did you at the end decide to come and do an MBA at Wharton? And, like, how are you thinking about your career after Wharton, and, like, how are you kind of leveraging the resources at Wharton to help you get there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, for me, kind of going back to the advice I've been given, it's like, if you did what you had to do undergrad, and you tell an honest and good story for where you want to go, like, there's going to be a lot of great MBA programs that you'll have a shot at. And yeah, super lucky to be at Wharton, and I couldn't be happier how it worked out. Kind of post-grad plans, right? I say I would like to continue tooling up. These are a couple of years where you tool up and kind of piece together your experiences. So how do I kind of coalesce everything I had learned and the thoughts I've had over the years to be a better working professional? And, ultimately, I think I'd like to build something down the line, right? But I don't think that day's today. I've never worked for a big company, right? That's one example. Would love to kind of dabble in, true bigger tech, understand the playbooks they already have. What is an Amazon, Google, Facebook, whatever? What are they doing? And how can I play my part in doing that? So I think I could use a bit more of a proceduralized and structured learning experience to, help me later in my career. And be a better teammate. I came to Wharton to be a better teammate. I've being a generalist at all these startups, working sales, post sales, and I was largely, given a map and said, go here on the map, and then bring back the gold, kind of, if that makes sense. So I've been kind of a lone wolf in a lot of the work I had done, but I wanted to be a better teammate, and Wharton's emphasis on the team-based learning environment has already, made me a better teammate, and I hope to be, a better leader to some degree, and yeah, maybe build some one day. But VC and building stuff is super interesting. But I have a few things to take care of first, I think.
Yeah, I think that's another large takeaway is, like, you don't have to plan everything in advance, like, or so far in advance. You don't have to have everything figured out. Like, just try things, see what you like, see what you don't like, and see where that takes you. But that's awesome to hear that, like, eventually, like maybe you want to go work in VC or one of these big tech companies. Are there any roles like do you want to try a different role, or do you kind of want to stay along like the operations, the strategy, the go-to-market side? Like, are there any specific roles that sound particularly interesting to you post-grad?
Yeah. I think, the idea of like corporate development or business development is super appealing. It's kind of nebulously defined and depends on the organization what that means. But I think loosely what that means here is you're trying to figure out ways, more inorganic means of growth for the company. What other holes can I poke in this business model, or other ways to expand what we're doing, and kind of being creative and modeling out ideas. So that's something I've been very curious to try. And then that's kind of versus more the organic side. When I think organic, I think, marketing, sales funnel, right? But yeah, I want to be in the strategic side. I'm fascinated by go-to-market strategy, and because I think so much of startups, right? People always talk about innovation through product, right? And it's very true. You need a great product to win, at least win big, right? But I think people sometimes short how important innovation through distribution is, right? There's so many ways to find new customers, or to reframe your messaging to get a new subset of customers. So yeah, I'm fascinated by that question. How else can I innovate around distribution and to get an awesome product in the hands of people who could really use it? So that's the focus for my next steps. And for anyone who wants to go on the same path, I actually wouldn't say don't go on the same path, but don't be afraid to experiment with stuff, right? If you're smart and hardworking, like, and you treat people well, and it's hard to fail. I mean, there might be times where it feels like everything sucks and maybe you messed up, and it's hard, but I think you kind of follow it in a non-traditional playbook. Things can work out. It just takes patience and continuing to do the right thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome to hear. It's interesting to hear like innovation on product and innovation, on distribution channels and like go to market and all those different areas. But I know we're coming up on time, and John, we can honestly talk about this for hours on end. Yeah, when you're back in Philly, we're gonna have to catch up with lunch and get Nigel in on it and everyone. But
absolutely,
I think this was really helpful. Thanks for like spending the time and talking about your career, the paths you took. I think it really helped bring a lot of transparency into like what does sales look like, what does working at a startup look like, what does strategy and biz ops at a startup look like. So really
yeah, no, happy to be here and to talk to this stuff. And if anyone else that reaches out about the podcast has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You have my email, johnpep at wharton.upenn. And yeah, I hope everyone takes a shot at things that they think is worth the shot. And sometimes people hold back, but you know what? There's a lot of routes to take, and there's infinite paths to success. So when you're young, you might as well try to experiment, because at the end of the day, you're probably going to be okay. So yeah, thanks for your time, guys. It's been fun.
Awesome. Yeah. Appreciate it, John. And listeners, make sure to just let us know if you have any feedback. We're always open to feedback. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Yeah, everybody have a great rest of your week. Thanks again, John. Appreciate having you on.
You got it. Adios, guys.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Later.
Thanks, John.